Yeah, next slide.
Yes, we hear you.
Wait,
Okay,
Wait,
here are some key concerns. Based on
Hold on.
2003 and pre-2003 data, the reactor pressure vessel on Unit 1 appears to be dangerously embrittled. Additionally, no reliable reference temperature data since 2003, no ultrasound testing since 2005. PG&E and NRC have endangered public health and safety on that issue alone. Reliance on generic and so-called integrated surveillance program data unjustified because DCPP1, it's Unit 1, and Palisades do not qualify under 10 CFR 50 Appendix H as ISP partners. Dr. Kurt's analytical methods concerning combining a combined Unit 1 and Palisades data show that the results are not credible, and I'll show you that in the graphs below. Our position is simply that Unit 1 should be closed immediately because of it's the only reasonable response to PG&E and NRC mismanagement. Next slide. As background, ASTM E18570 stipulates 5+ capsules irradiated up to the end of life. And the reason for that is that the shift in the reference temperature was predicted to be more than 200 degrees Fahrenheit due to high nickel and copper in weld 27204. That was forewarned by Westinghouse. A minimum of 5 RT-NDT versus fluence data are crucial to practical optimization of the model on the equations of RG 1.99 revision 2, 1988. Interesting, the original surveillance program comprised 8 capsules, of which 3 had the weld metal 27204 and 5 contained the base metal. And it's interesting that it's surprising that PG&E and NRC's insistence did not replace the base metal capsules with additional capsules containing weld metal, so that we would have a good body of data. The basic problem with Unit 1 is that we have too few data. Next slide. Okay, I want to point out a problem with Dr. Kirk's definition of delta T 41J, which is the reference temperature at 30 foot-pounds. The solid lines in these curves here are the hyperbolic tangent functions, which I'll describe in a few minutes. But you'll notice that the red line passes through 30 foot-pounds, and you'll notice that upon irradiation, there's a negative shift in delta T. And of course, that is simply a result of the fact that it was arbitrarily defined by ASME and uncritically adopted by NRC and PG&E. And this is a graph that I took from Eason et al., in which they point out this ridiculous situation where there's a negative shift in delta T 41J upon irradiation. On the other hand, if you were to find the shift at being at the point of inflection of this symmetric hyperbolic tangent function, you can see there's very little effect And one of the issues here is that we're not absolutely certain what level of irradiation was applied to this sample. Next slide, please. Here's Dr. Kirk's analysis. The points marked D for Diablo Canyon. There's a generic point at minus 50 degrees centigrade. And then the first point up from that is capsule S, the capsule Y, the capsule V, and then two data points that were taken from Palisades. And you can see that what happens is that those data points from Palisades tend to bend down the curve. And so that the curve begins to flatten out and run parallel to the screening criterion. But the biggest problem with this graph, and I don't think it's something that NRC would sanction, is that Dr. Kirk has committed the original sin in science and engineering. He hasn't included error bars. He seems to have cherry-picked the Palisades data because he published in RG 1.99 revision 2 a supplement to that report in which he showed that there was a data point at a much higher value of RT-NDT, and shown in the next slide where I include the error bars. And as you can see, if I draw a straight line through the data points with the error bars, by the way, are defined by Eason et al. And so they're not invented by me. They're actually based on hard data. And you can see the intersection occurs somewhere between about 1.2 and 2.2 to 2.4 times 10 to the 19 neutrons per centimeter squared. On the other hand, if you were to draw a line through the Palisades data that he used, the two data, you draw a line that is essentially parallel to the PTS screening criteria, and these curves never intersect. And so what that means is the reactor could keep operating forever without running into a problem. But he cherry-picked his data because at the top, above the PTS screening criteria, is that data marked P, which is in that supplement to RG 1.99. So our point here is that such an analysis is invalid unless you are capable of quantifying the error bars. Next slide, please.
Hold on. Digby MacDonald, this is Bob Budnitz. I just want to ask one simple question. The plot with the error bars. Are those intended?
I'm sorry?
Are those intended, or are they one standard deviation? I mean, in other words, are they 95% confidence? Are they one standard deviation? What sort of uncertainty is captured by these bars?
Yeah, the error bars are plus or minus about 25 degrees Fahrenheit on the vertical scale.
Well, I can see that they're plus or minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit. It goes from 0 to, I mean, I can see that, but the question is, are they one standard deviation of confidence, or are they two, or are they based on some?
No, that's roughly the standard deviation.
Say it again. It's one standard deviation?
Right, one standard deviation.
How in the world is the same plus or minus 25, or whatever it looks, roughly, the same error bar for all those points? And secondly, okay, the one in the lower left-hand corner has, it goes on the vertical, goes on the abscissa, has the same size error bars on the abscissa. It looks like it goes from 50 to 150, which is a huge error in percentage for that lower point. Is that really, are you telling me that the fluence that particular thing is anchored to is uncertain by such a very large amount?
Well, it
and then
defines,
notice the
it
fluence is-
depends
the
on
uncertainty
what's
in the fluence
counted
is the
in,
same. The
in
uppermost
determining
one
the
has
fluence.
the same fluence uncertainty. And I don't understand, you can explain, where does the uncertainty in the fluence, that's the abscissa, come from? And why is it the same for the ones way up there? Because the one way up there has an uncertainty of plus or minus, it only has an uncertainty of about 10%, whereas the one below has an uncertainty of about way more than 100%, because it's the same absolute. I want you to, before I can interpret this, and I'm a physicist, and I have spent my entire career interpreting error bars. That's what we do. That's what physicists do. I need to understand what is the origin of these uncertainties.
Well, all I can tell you is that there's a large uncertainty in the fluence because it depends on what you count in determining the fluence.
Oh.
Whether you count effective full power years or you take into account all the power level changes and so forth. That's not entirely clear from the
I understand that.
Westinghouse reports.
I understand that, but look at the one in the lower left-hand corner, and let's forget about it. That's one's labeled G. The next one is labeled D. Now, D is a sample, is a coupon that came out of Diablo Canyon early on. That's what that one is.
Right, yes.
All right, now, I don't understand why its fluence is not, it's 150 plus or minus 50. I don't understand how the fluence isn't understood by such a big percentage factor for that early capsule.
Okay, maybe we can come back to that.
Yeah.
I've got limited time, and so
Say it again.
Yeah,
next.
the one that has zero dose also is not physical that it could have negative dose. The one at the far left.
What I'm saying is, it looks to me like somebody took the point and drew the same cross, you know, up and down and left and right for each point. Whereas the true uncertainty can't possibly be the fluence on that point D, the one that's about, you know, the first one, not the zero, but the next. They can't possibly be that you don't.
Okay, I'll come back to that.
Within 50%, that's just baloney.
Okay, next slide.
Okay.
Okay, the hyperbolic, symmetric hyperbolic tan function is that equation 1. And from that, you can calculate just by mathematical manipulation, the upper shelf energy, the lower shelf energy, the fracture energy at the point of inflection, the RT NDT at the point of inflection, that's equal to T naught. And from that, you can convert from delta T41J into RT NDT POI and so forth. And then finally, you can define a extent of embrittlement by that last equation. And these help illustrate, I'll show you on the following slide, illustrate how the point of inflection is in my mind, is a superior method of following what happens with the embrittlement. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the extent of embrittlement versus fluence. And I've left the error bars off on this because I wanted to illustrate one point which seems to be consistent. And you'll see that the weld metal is by far the component that is most sensitive to fluence. But you'll notice that the upper 2 points on the weld metal, it appears that the extent of embrittlement goes to a maximum. And this appears consistently, not only in my calculations, but also in calculations that have been shown by other people. The important thing here is that it does not require a large fraction of the fracture surface to be covered by brittle facets to achieve embrittlement. And if you look at the upper right plot, you can see that a 10% change in the extent of embrittlement essentially covers the whole range of fluences up to the end of life. And so we're talking about relatively small amounts of changes in the fracture surface in order to account for the embrittlement. Next slide, please. Now, the UT volumetric testing is indispensable. First of all, we have to understand that cascade formation of hot interstitials and vacancies due to interaction with high energy neutrons. Delta T 41J test for radiation embrittlement. UT volumetric testing looks for fissures that might convert into brittle fractures under pressurized thermal shock. Initial vacancy condensation on intermetallic particles acts as a barrier to dislocation movement, and hence in a loss in ductility. That's embrittlement. These processes tend to occur in tandem as condensation of vacancies on intermetallic particles leads to fissure growth. A possible role for helium and hydrogen pressurization of fissures, leading to subcritical crack growth. And lots of hydrogen is available in the coolant. Of course, they add hydrogen to the extent of 25 to 50 centimeter cube per kilogram of H2O to the primary coolant. So there's lots of hydrogen around, but it's absolutely essential that that ultrasonic testing, volumetric testing, be carried out, and it cannot be discarded, as Dr. Kirk states. That would be foolish. Next slide, please. The necessary tests, I don't disagree with everything that Dr. Kirk says. The one thing we do agree on is that many compact tension specimens should be machined from remnants of the failed Sharpie specimens from capsules S, Y, and V to measure the fracture toughness directly. A sufficient number could be machined to yield statistically meaningful values for the fracture toughness. The WOL specimens should be tested for both K1 minimum, that is, the crack would grow until the stress intensity factor becomes limiting in its lower end and the crack stops growing, and then it could be loaded in a load frame and pulled to failure in order to calculate K1C, the fracture toughness from compliance of the specimen. I'm proposing that we could use back interpolation, given that capsule B will have a fluence of about 3.7 times 10 to the 19 neutrons per centimeter squared by the time it is pulled. And by the way, it's incorrect to not to note that capsule B was added as the fourth capsule of the program as part of a deal that was struck between PG&E and the NRC for a 37-month extension of the operating license of Unit 1. So, nano indentation is also a useful measurement that could be used to supplement the mini CT and delta T 41J. Next slide, please. So in conclusions, it's our position that Unit 1 must be closed now because its continued operation has not been justified by Dr. Kirk. It must be fully tested to the satisfaction of an independent committee before reopening. Given the high fluence of capsule B, 3.6 times 3.7 times 10 to the 19, depending on when it will be actually pulled. The testing methods approved by the NRC will not tell us much. Therefore, alternative measures are necessary. And I'm suggesting backward interpolation with the low fluency end anchored by capsules S, Y, and V, and the high end anchored by capsule B. And I think that stands a very good chance of being able to recover a value for delta T 41J at the end of the initial operating period. Okay, with that, I think that's pretty well it. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm gonna ask a question again. And if you could go back to slide number 6, it would help. It's the figure. That one. I said before that I don't understand these error bars, and it doesn't make sense to me that the error bars are as shown. I cannot believe that the lowest capsule S, the one that's, you know, it's shown, it's not the lowest left-hand corner, but it's the next one up.
Yeah, no,
I just
I see
cannot
what your
believe
point
that the
is,
fluence has that uncertainty.
and that was a mistake on my part in drawing it that way.
Right. But that's the fluence, that's the abscissa. But on the ordinate,
Yeah, but
I also find it hard to believe that RT-NDT shift is shown as about 25, and the error bar goes from 0 to 50. That seems like such a large percentage uncertainty on a measurement of something that was done whenever it was after a few years of operation.
That corresponds to 1 sigma, and those data come from the report by ESM. It goes CFR 65501.
Okay, now the other thing that I don't understand is that there's S, Y, and V. You know, these other, Y is the one that's at about a fluence of 1, and V is the one that's a fluence of about 1.4. They're labeled with a D there. And then, you know, the other ones are from Palisades, but I'm just looking at that.
Okay.
And
Good.
I don't understand how, again, that fluence is that uncertain, that it goes from about, you know, Y goes from 1 is in the middle, but it goes from about 0.6 to about 1.4. That's a huge percentage uncertainty. We don't have uncertainties in the fluence that big. I just don't understand. Now on the ordinate, I don't understand how that measurement, which I'm looking at Y, I think is the one. It's the second. It's the, you know, the third one up. The dot on the ordinate is about 75, and the uncertainty goes from 50 to 100.
Well, all I can tell you is that that's
it seems to
table
me
4.1 in that report by ESM. They give the standard deviation of these data. That's of the 400 and something reactor database. And that's the standard deviation that they give in that table.
All right, so I just want to say that Bob Budnitz is
Well,
telling
all I can do is to refer you to the table.
some defense or documentation or argument or technical basis needs to be provided for those uncertainties if they're to be interpreted in terms of trying to compare the screening criteria with where you are. And until that's done, which perhaps you can do, I have no complaint if you can do it, just write it up and send it in.
Well, you know,
but absent that, this thing is uninterpretable to me.
yeah, well, the error bar and the horizontal error bar at the first point and the generic point, that was obviously misdrawn by me.
Well, I'm not going to argue the case, but I want to tell you something.
And for
Wait, I want to tell you something. This is very important. If you don't put error bars on at all, if you don't put error bars at all and don't pretend to, that's not a cardinal sin. It is simply an omission. But if you put them on and say what they are and they're wrong, that's a cardinal sin, as opposed to the other one, which is not pretending to have them. So if these aren't right, I'm using your word, Cardinal Sin. I didn't make that word up. I would have
Well,
never.
those are the best
But that's your
error
word, and
bars
I'm
that
throwing
we
it right back at you because I'm a physicist and I understand how error bars are generated based on data and models and some, frankly, staring at your navel, and that's not wrong, but they just have to have some defense. And without them, this curve, which is the fundamental basis for your argument, doesn't hold water. I rest my case.
No, I disagree with you. I
All
totally
right, well,
disagree
you're
with
allowed
you.
to, but I'm up here.
Okay, that's fine.
Additional comments from the committee bench?